My name is Aaron Blake. I served 12 years in the United States Air Force and left with the rank of captain. But none of that mattered the day my half-brother stood in federal court and told the world I was a thief. I remember the way his voice didn't shake, how he looked directly at the judge and said, "She forged every document. She rerouted millions." It wasn't the accusation that stunned me. It was how easy it came from him. Like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. We share a father, but not much else. He always resented how close I was to Dad, how he called me the one who made it right. And now, with my father gone and my service record sealed behind layers of classified missions, I had no way to fight back. Not in that room. The judge didn't look at me. He adjusted his glasses, read a few lines on the report, and nodded slightly. In that moment, it felt like the years I spent chasing storms, managing disaster drills, and leading teams through blackouts, all of it just vanished. I was invisible. And worse, I was guilty in their eyes without a shred of real proof. Because in court, when someone you're blood related to accuses you, it doesn't just carry weight. It crushes everything you thought you built. I walked out of that courthouse hearing whispers I couldn't block out. Didn't expect it from her. I heard it was 18 million. She always seemed too clean. The kind of murmurs that eat at your spine, not your ears. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went home, locked the door, and sat in my uniform for hours, staring at the commendation pinned to my chest. I'd earned it after a night spent rescuing pilots trapped in sub-zero winds off the coast of Norway. That ribbon meant everything to me. Now it felt like a lie. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed. No calls from old teammates. No messages from the base. It was as if I never existed. As if the Air Force wanted to forget they'd ever trained someone like me. And somewhere beneath all that silence, all that disbelief, something cracked inside me, not in the way that breaks you for good, but in the way that warns you. That says, if you don't fight back now, your story ends here. So I did what I'd always done when facing the impossible. I stood up. I brewed coffee. I reviewed every single detail I could remember from the last 3 years. I was going to find out who was behind this. And I was going to prove them wrong. But before I could clear my name, I had to face a truth I'd buried deep. That sometimes, the worst betrayal doesn't come from the enemy. It comes from the one who knows exactly how to destroy you. 2 days after that hearing, I woke up to my name splashed across national news. Captain Aaron Blake is under investigation for federal embezzlement. A grainy photo of me from 5 years ago stared back from the screen, cropped harshly under a bold red banner. They used a shot where I looked angry. I wasn't. I had just returned from a 3-day blackout training, exhausted and squinting into the Sunday. But context doesn't matter when you're already being painted as guilty. By noon, a van was parked outside my gate. A reporter in a Navy windbreaker shouted over my fence, asking if I had anything to say. I closed the blinds and stepped back from the window like that would make it all disappear. It didn't. That afternoon, they ran the footage of me walking into court. Silent, head high. The voiceover said, Blake refused to comment. Many interpret this as a silent admission of guilt. I wanted to throw something at the screen, but I didn't. I just stood there. Silence had always been my armor. We were trained for it. In the Air Force, you don't talk about classified projects, not even to your family, and certainly not to the press. That rule used to mean protection. Now, it felt like a trap. I worked on a classified operation back in 2008 called Project Solstice. It was a joint energy research program designed to protect Arctic installations. I can't even tell you what we discovered. That's how locked down it was. Only 7 people had full access, and I was one of them. We operated in total darkness, not just from the literal environment, but from the world. No credit, no public briefings. I was proud of that. Until now, because when the world came knocking, wanting answers. I had none I was allowed to give. I watched anchors speculate on air about why I hadn't defended myself. If she's innocent, why not speak? One asked. I wanted to scream back, because I swore an oath. Even my own mother called me and asked, "Why are you letting them say these things?" I told her I couldn't talk about it. She sighed and didn't call back for weeks. The people I thought would stand beside me, they ghosted. Old squad mates didn't reply to messages. My CO sent a single text. "Hope you're okay. Can't get involved." That one hit hardest. I wasn't just isolated, I was erased. One day, I'm a decorated officer. The next, a digital ghost with no defenders and too many enemies to count. I remember sitting on the porch at night, wrapped in my old field jacket, listening to the distant hum of the TV cruise generator. The cold didn't bother me, the quiet did. It used to be peace. Now it was punishment. I kept going over every report, every transfer, every tiny decision. I couldn't find a single misstep that explained how my clearance codes had ended up tied to this scandal. But I knew one thing. If someone was using my identity, they had inside access. That narrowed the suspects fast, and one name kept rising to the surface: my brother. I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, a mistake that had spiraled out of control. But then I remembered the way he looked at me in court. Calm, prepared. Not the face of someone unsure, the face of someone with a plan. He had always hated how Dad trusted me with more stories, more responsibilities, more of his legacy. And now that Dad was gone, I guess he figured it was his turn, even if he had to bury me to get there. I went weeks without turning on the lights, ate mostly canned food, slept maybe 3 hours a night. That kind of silence doesn't just surround you. It gets inside you. Until you start to wonder if maybe the world was right about you all along. But there's something strange about hitting bottom. It clears your vision. I stopped caring what they called me. Traitor, thief, fraud. I knew the truth. I had always known it. The only question left was whether I had the guts to prove it. Even if that meant breaking the silence I'd sworn to keep. I found the drive by accident. Tucked inside a box of old deployment files, wrapped in a sealed envelope, marked only with my father's initials. I recognized the casing immediately: military-grade titanium, used only for high-security data transfers. Inside, it was a single folder, labeled Solstice 47, restricted. I stared at the screen, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt since live combat drills. This wasn't just backup data, it was everything. The fund transfers, the mission specs, and a hidden memo from Naval Command verifying the operation's legitimacy. I had no idea how my father got a copy, or why he kept it secret, but it was real, and it could clear my name, or get me locked up for violating multiple federal statutes. I sat frozen, the glow of the laptop screen painting the walls in a pale blue. This was proof, but also proof I was never supposed to have. Possessing it could land me in deeper trouble. Releasing it could be career suicide. My phone rang. The number was blocked. I almost didn't answer, but I did. The voice on the other end was gravelly, unmistakable. "Captain Blake, this is General Reeve. Listen carefully." He didn't ask how I was, didn't offer sympathy, just said, "You're not crazy. Someone used your credentials. But if you release what you have, you'll be charged. That's the deal." I didn't speak. My mouth was dry. He paused, then added, "You swore to protect the mission. But the mission was never meant to protect traitors. Use that drive when the time is right. You'll know." Then the line went dead. I sat there, still gripping the phone. The data sat on the screen in silence, waiting. My career, my freedom, my name. It all came down to one choice: say nothing, stay safe, or speak up, and risk everything. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. I wore my old gray suit, the one that didn't quite fit anymore, and pinned the small Air Force insignia just above my heart. I told myself it wasn't for show, but it was the only piece of identity I had left that felt real. As I walked past the bench, the judge glanced up. His eyes landed on the pin, and for a moment, he didn't speak. Then he leaned slightly forward and said, almost too softly to hear, USS Galveston, Winter 2006. You pulled me out of the water. I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't recognized him. Not without the gear and the ice and the storm. But now I did. His name was Hale. We'd never spoken back then. Just a nod of thanks as he was lifted onto the evac boat, soaked, blue-lipped, and alive. I nodded, unable to say much else. He looked back down at his papers. Captain Blake, he said, this time louder, firmer. You're clear to proceed. That was it. No dramatic gesture. No guarantee he believed me. But the shift in his voice cracked something in the air. For the time in months, I didn't feel entirely alone. As I sat down, I rested my hand over the insignia. The metal was cool against my palm, but it pulsed with memory. I didn't know what would happen next, but someone remembered. Someone knew I was more than the accusations. Hope, when it returns, doesn't roar. It whispers. And that whisper was enough to steady me. The box was heavier than I remembered. Military green, scratched along the edges, and sealed with a rusted latch that hadn't been touched in years. It sat at the bottom of my father's old footlocker, under layers of folded uniforms and letters I hadn't dared to open. I carried it to the kitchen table, cleared off the clutter, and sat down across from it like I was preparing for a negotiation. My fingers hesitated on the latch. Some part of me still hoped this was all a mistake, that the truth wouldn't be locked in a box, waiting to either free me or destroy me. The latch snapped open with a sharp click. Inside, under a thick layer of foam, were 4 items: a sealed file marked Solstice, Class Delta Clearance, a worn flash drive, an old photograph of my father and General Reeve, and a single handwritten envelope with my name on it. I opened the letter first. The handwriting was familiar Reeve's. Slanted, precise, like every word was measured before it hit the page. Aaron, it began. If you're reading this, then silence has already done its damage. Project Solstice was real, authorized, and buried for good reason. But if the day comes when it's used against you, you are permitted to speak. My hands shook. Just slightly. He had signed the letter with a name and a seal I hadn't seen in over a decade. Delta Command, Eastern Intelligence Wing. The letter was dated 9 days before his retirement, 1 week before my father died. I turned to the file. The documents were stamped with dates from 2007 through 2009, each page marked confidential in red. There were original sign-offs from Naval Command, expense authorizations, and satellite schematics. Every signature matched the records I remembered submitting. Nothing forged. Nothing fake. In the corner of the last page was a redacted memo. Subject deemed sensitive to national interests. To be declassified only under internal threat. I stared at those words, like they were code. They didn't just mean an external attack, they meant betrayal. I closed the file and held the flash drive between my palms. It was ice cold. Part of me wished I could unsee it all. But I couldn't. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who'd buried the truth, and the ones who thought I'd stay buried with it. I placed everything back in the box, careful, deliberate. The weight of it now felt different. Like history was no longer a chain, but a key. Whatever happened next, I wasn't just defending myself. I was defending the truth my father left behind. I walked into the courthouse wearing my old dress blues. The fabric was tighter around the shoulders, faded at the seams, but it still held the shape of who I used to be. The Air Force insignia on my chest caught the morning light as I stepped past the cameras and into the hallway I once feared. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the benches. My brother, Ethan, sat calmly in the front row, smirking like none of it mattered. But when I passed him with the titanium box in my hands, his smile faded. I took the stand in silence and set the box down. The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "Another stunt?" he asked. I didn't answer. I turned to Judge Hale and waited. Then the back door opened. The air shifted. General Reeves stepped in, uniform sharp, eyes locked on mine. A murmur rolled through the room. He walked straight to the witness chair and spoke with the weight of truth behind every word. Project Solstice was a classified operation. Captain Blake executed her duties under full federal authority. He handed over a signed affidavit, stamped, verified, unshakable. I opened the box and submitted the sealed file from Delta Command, along with the letter authorizing me to speak. Judge Hale examined the papers. He looked at Reeve, then at me. Then his gaze settled on my brother in the front row. The room was deathly silent. "Mr. Ethan Blake," the judge's voice was cold, cutting. "Your testimony under oath stated these documents were forged and that your sister rerouted millions. I am now looking at verified, classified documents from Naval Command and an affidavit from General Reeve confirming the operation's legitimacy." I watched my brother. The smirk was gone. His face, which had been so calm and prepared, was now pale, blotchy with sweat. He started to stand, to bluster. "Your Honor, this is a trick, she." "Sit down, Mr. Blake!" Judge Hale's voice snapped like a trap. "The evidence presented by your half-brother appears to be fabricated. The lies end here." Ethan sank back into his chair. He looked from the judge to General Reeve. Then finally, at me. His eyes weren't just angry. They were trapped. The man who tried to bury me under lies was now buried under the truth. Judge Hale looked back at me. His voice came steady and low. "Captain Blake, your name is cleared. All accusations are dismissed." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply stood straighter. For months, I had carried silence like a curse. Now, it had become my shield. In that moment, the courtroom wasn't a battlefield. It was a place of rebirth. Not just because I had survived the lies, but because, for the first time, the world saw me the way I always was. Not broken, not guilty. Just a soldier who never stopped standing. The morning after the ruling, my face was everywhere. News anchors called me a hero. Headlines shifted from fraud to patriot, like they hadn't spent months trying to bury me. Ethan and his team faced federal charges: fraud, perjury, obstruction of justice. The system, so slow to believe me, moved swiftly once the truth was undeniable. I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile for the cameras. I gave no interviews. I packed a small bag, left a note with my lawyer, and drove back to the only place that still felt like mine, the cabin on the coast. It smelled like salt and old pine, just as it always had. I brewed coffee slowly, the way I used to before everything collapsed. The mug warmed my hands, steady and grounding, while sunlight slid across the wooden floor like a soft ribbon. I walked to the table and set the cup down. The light caught on the old military box. I opened it one last time, the metal latch cool against my skin. I looked at the Air Force insignia, resting on top of my father's letters. It wasn't just metal. It held everything I'd fought for, everything I'd almost lost. But it didn't define me. I closed the lid gently. The silence in the cabin wasn't heavy anymore. It breathed with me. I took my mug to the back porch and let the ocean air roll in. The sea was calm, the kind of stillness that only comes after a long storm. They say the truth is loud, but I've learned it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits, quiet, steady, like the tide. I watched the waves pull back, slow and constant. Not an ending, just the ocean remembering how to begin again.